The champagne cork echoed through my house like a gunshot, followed by laughter that chilled my blood more than any winter wind ever could. My own son, my flesh and blood, was celebrating what he believed was my death. My name is Gloria Henderson. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. For the past 3 decades, I've called this beautiful Victorian home my sanctuary, the place where I raised my son Michael after his father walked out on us when the boy was just 12. I never remarried, choosing instead to pour every ounce of my love, energy, and financial resources into giving Michael the life I thought he deserved. The morning of April 15th started like any other spring day in Nashville. The dogwood trees were blooming outside my kitchen window, and I was preparing for Michael's 42nd birthday celebration that evening. I had spent $2,800 on catering his favorite foods, hired a string quartet for yonder $200, and even bought him a vintage guitar worth $5,500 that I knew he'd been eyeing for months. The total cost didn't matter to me. It never did when it came to my son. What I didn't expect was to overhear a phone conversation that would shatter my world completely. As I was arranging flowers in the dining room, I heard Michael in the next room, his voice low but audible through the thin walls. "I'm telling you, Sarah, I can't wait much longer," he whispered urgently into his phone. "The old woman is taking forever to die naturally. Do you know how much this house is worth? At least $800,000, plus all her investments. We could finally have our dream life." My hands trembled as I set down the crystal vase, nearly dropping it. Sarah, his girlfriend, who had been staying in my guest room for the past 6 months, eating my food and using my utilities, while I graciously welcomed her into our family. "If something were to happen to her soon," Michael continued, "we could be in Tuscany by Christmas, living in that villa we looked at. No more pretending to care about her endless stories or putting up with her constant need for attention." The words hit me like physical blows. Every sacrifice I had made, selling my mother's jewelry to pay for his college tuition, taking a second mortgage on this house to fund his failed business ventures, giving him $35,000 just last year to pay off his debts, all of it meant nothing to him. I was nothing more than an obstacle standing between him and his inheritance. That's when the idea struck me. If Michael wanted to see me dead so badly, perhaps it was time to give him exactly what he wished for, at least temporarily. I spent the rest of the day planning my performance, my heart breaking with each detail I considered. As evening approached and the guests began arriving for Michael's birthday party, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I was about to discover the true nature of my son's heart, and though I feared what I might find, I needed to know the truth. After the last guest left around 10 o'clock, I waited until Michael and Sarah were settled in the living room with a bottle of expensive wine. Wine I had bought, of course. Then I retrieved my smartphone, set it to record, and placed it strategically on the bookshelf where it would capture everything clearly. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the living room, clutched my chest dramatically, and collapsed onto the hardwood floor. If you're feeling as shocked as I was in that moment, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I want to hear from all of you. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Your support means everything to me as I share this incredibly difficult but important story. The moment I hit the floor, the world became a theater of deception, and I was both the starring actress and the horrified audience member watching my own tragedy unfold. I lay perfectly still on the cold hardwood, my eyes closed, but my ears straining to catch every sound, every whispered word that would reveal my son's true character. My heart was pounding so loudly in my chest that I worried it might give away my ruse, but I forced myself to remain motionless, my breathing shallow and irregular, exactly how I imagined someone in cardiac distress might appear. "Michael!" Sarah's voice pierced the air, sharp with what I initially mistook for concern. "Something's wrong with your mother!" I heard footsteps approaching, the sound of Michael's expensive leather shoes I had bought him for Christmas just 4 months earlier for $400, clicking against the floor as he moved toward my still form. This was it. This was the moment that would define our relationship forever. Through my barely parted eyelids, I could see Michael kneeling beside me. His face came into view, and for a split second, I saw what looked like genuine worry creasing his brow. My heart leaped with desperate hope. Maybe I had misunderstood his phone conversation. Maybe my son truly did love me. Then his fingers found my wrist, checking my pulse with the clinical detachment of a stranger. His expression shifted, and what I saw next would haunt me for the rest of my days. The worry melted away, replaced by something cold and calculating. He tilted his head, listening to my breathing, watching my chest rise and fall with the barely perceptible movements I was managing to maintain. "Is she?" Sarah whispered from somewhere behind him. Michael's response came in a voice so low I had to strain to hear it, but every word burned itself into my memory. Finally free from this old woman. The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son. The baby I had rocked to sleep thousands of nights. The child I had defended against every playground bully. The young man I had sacrificed everything to support, was relieved at the prospect of my death. But it got worse. So much worse. Michael stood up slowly, and I heard him whisper to Sarah, "Check if she's really gone. I think this might be it." Sarah's footsteps moved closer, and I felt her presence hovering over me. She was surprisingly thorough, checking my pulse at multiple points, even lifting my eyelid to peer at my pupil. I had to use every ounce of self-control to keep my eye unfocused and unresponsive. "I can't find a pulse," she said quietly. "And look at her color. She's getting pale." What happened next defied every expectation I had harbored about my son's character. Instead of calling 911, instead of attempting CPR, instead of showing even the slightest bit of grief or panic, Michael straightened up and said words that would echo in my nightmares. "Well, we should probably wait a few more minutes to make sure, but then we need to call the authorities. We want to make sure we handle this properly for the inheritance paperwork." Inheritance paperwork. My own son was thinking about inheritance paperwork while my supposedly lifeless body lay at his feet. "Should we call an ambulance?" Sarah asked, but her tone suggested she wasn't particularly eager to do so. "What's the point now?" Michael replied callously. "She's gone. An ambulance would just be a waste of money. Her money, technically, but still. We need to be smart about this." I heard them walking away from my body, their voices growing distant as they moved toward the kitchen. Then came the sound that would forever symbolize my son's betrayal, the distinctive pop of a champagne cork being released. The irony was devastating. We had opened champagne earlier that evening to celebrate Michael's birthday, toasting his life and future with joy and love. Now, less than 2 hours later, he was opening another bottle to celebrate what he believed was my death. The laughter that followed was even worse than the champagne. It wasn't the nervous laughter of people in shock or grief. It was genuine, celebratory laughter. They were actually happy that I was dead. As I lay there on the floor, listening to my son and his girlfriend celebrate my demise, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life had been a lie. The love I thought we shared, the bond I believed was unbreakable, the sacrifices I had made with such joy, all of it had been one-sided. But they had made one crucial mistake. In their eagerness to celebrate, they had forgotten about the smartphone I had hidden on the bookshelf, faithfully recording every damning word, every heartless laugh, every moment of their betrayal. The recording that would change everything was capturing it all. The sounds from the kitchen grew louder and more painful with each passing minute. As I lay motionless on the living room floor, I could hear Michael and Sarah clinking glasses, their voices animated with an excitement that made my skin crawl. "To freedom!" Michael's voice carried clearly from the kitchen, and I could hear the smile in his words. To finally being able to live our own lives without that constant burden. Burden. That's what I was to my son. A burden. "She really picked the perfect timing," Sarah giggled, her voice slightly slurred from the wine. "Right after the birthday party, when everyone's already gone home, no witnesses to deal with, no awkward explanations about why we're not more upset." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from gasping audibly. They had actually thought about witnesses? About having to fake grief in front of other people? "The best part," Michael continued, and I could hear him opening what sounded like another bottle, "is that everything is already in my name as the beneficiary. The house, the investment accounts, the life insurance policy." She was so trusting, so eager to make sure I was taken care of. Little did she know she was just making it easier for us to get rid of her. Get rid of me? The phrase echoed in my mind like a death knell. Had they been planning something? Was my fake heart attack preventing them from carrying out some more sinister plan? "How much do you think it's all worth?" Sarah asked, her greed barely concealed beneath a thin veneer of curiosity. "Well, the house alone is worth at least $800,000 in this market. Michael replied, his voice taking on the tone of someone who had clearly given this considerable thought. Then there's her investment portfolio. Last I checked, it was sitting at around $1. $2 million. The life insurance policy will pay out $500,000. Plus, she's got jewelry, artwork, and that vintage car collection in the garage that's probably worth another $200,000. My heart sank as I listened to him itemize my assets with the precision of an accountant. Every number he mentioned represented years of careful saving, wise investing, and deliberate sacrifice. The $1, $2 million investment portfolio had taken me 30 years to build, putting away money even when times were tight, especially after Michael's father left us with nothing but debt and broken promises. So, we're looking at almost $3 million total? Sarah's voice was breathless with excitement. Give or take, Michael confirmed. And the beauty of it is, she spent her whole life making sure I knew where everything was, teaching me about her finances because she wanted me to be prepared. She practically handed me the roadmap to her wealth. The betrayal cut deeper with every word. Those financial conversations he was referencing had been some of our most intimate moments over the past few years. I had shared my financial knowledge with him because I wanted him to be secure after I was gone. I had taught him about investing because I hoped he would continue building the legacy I was leaving him. I had shown him where I kept important documents because I trusted him completely. What about the funeral? Sarah asked, and I could hear the clink of ice in glasses. Keep it simple and cheap, Michael replied without hesitation. She always said she wanted to be cremated anyway. We'll do a basic service, nothing fancy. Maybe spend $3,000 at most. No point in wasting money on a big production when she's not around to care about it anymore. $3,000 for a woman who had spent $47,000 on his wedding 5 years ago, a marriage that lasted only 18 months. For a woman who had given him $35,000 just last year to bail him out of his financial troubles. For a woman who had spent every Christmas, birthday, and holiday for the past 4 decades, making sure he felt loved and celebrated. You know what the funny thing is? Michael's voice took on a reflective tone that might have sounded philosophical if I didn't know better. She always used to worry that I didn't visit enough, that I didn't call enough. She had no idea that every visit, every call, every family gathering was torture for me. Listening to her stories, pretending to care about her garden or her book club or whatever trivial thing she was excited about. It was exhausting. Those trivial things he was dismissing so cruelly were the highlights of my weeks. Our phone calls were what I looked forward to most. When I shared stories about my garden, it was because I knew he had helped me plant those roses when he was 15. When I talked about my book club, it was because I was reading books I thought he might enjoy, hoping to find new things we could discuss together. The guilt trips were the worst, Sarah added, clearly emboldened by the alcohol and the moment. Always talking about how lonely she was, how much she missed having family around. It was so manipulative. They thought my genuine loneliness and desire to spend time with my son was manipulation. Well, we won't have to deal with that anymore, Michael said with finality. No more obligation visits. No more pretending to be grateful for her generosity. No more walking on eggshells around her feelings. As I listened to them systematically tear apart every aspect of our relationship, I realized that the love I thought we shared had been entirely one-sided for years, possibly decades. I had been living in a fantasy, believing that my son cared about me, while he was actually counting down the days until my death would set him free. The recording device continued its silent documentation of their celebration, capturing evidence that would soon turn their joy into something else entirely. They had no idea that their champagne toast to my death was being preserved for posterity, that every cruel word and heartless laugh was being stored in digital form, waiting to be played back at the most devastating possible moment. But I wasn't ready to reveal myself yet. I needed to hear more. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal before I decided how to respond. 23 minutes. That's how long I lay on that cold hardwood floor, listening to my son and his girlfriend celebrate my supposed death before they finally returned to check on my body. 23 minutes of champagne toasts, cruel laughter, and planning their new life with my money. When I heard their footsteps approaching again, I prepared myself for what came next. This time, their conversation would reveal depths of betrayal I never could have imagined. We should probably start thinking about the timeline, Sarah said, her voice now businesslike despite the alcohol. When should we call the paramedics? I've been thinking about that, Michael replied, and I could hear him settling into the armchair near my head, the same chair where I used to read him bedtime stories 40 years ago. We need to be careful about the timing. Too quick, and it might look suspicious. Too long, and someone might ask why we waited. Suspicious. They were actually worried about appearing suspicious after my death. The implications of this conversation were becoming more terrifying by the minute. What if someone asks why we didn't try CPR? Sarah wondered aloud. I'll tell them I did try, but I was too panicked to do it properly, Michael answered smoothly. People will understand. It's traumatic to watch your mother die in front of you. The ease with which he planned to lie about the most traumatic moment of his supposed life was chilling, but what came next was even worse. You know, Michael continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, part of me was starting to wonder if we should have helped things along a little. She's been healthy for a 67-year-old, could have lived another 20 years, easily. Helped things along. The phrase made my blood run cold. Were they talking about what I thought they were talking about? Michael, Sarah's voice carried a note of warning, don't say things like that, even now. I'm just saying, he pressed on, apparently emboldened by alcohol and what he believed was my permanent silence. It would have been so easy. Her blood pressure medication, for instance, double or triple the dose, and it would look like she made a mistake. Old people do that all the time. My blood pressure medication. The pills I took every morning without fail, trusting that the correct dosage would keep me healthy. The pills that Michael had helped me organize into weekly containers just last month, when I mentioned I sometimes forgot whether I'd taken them. Or her sleeping pills, he continued, warming to his topic in a way that made my skin crawl. She takes those every night, a few extra, maybe with some wine, and everyone would just assume she was depressed and lonely. Accidental overdose, they'd call it. Happens to elderly people all the time. Stop it, Sarah hissed, but she didn't sound horrified. She sounded worried about being overheard. Nobody's going to hear us, Michael reassured her. She's dead, and we're alone in the house. Besides, it doesn't matter now. Nature took care of our problem for us. Our problem. That's what I was to them. A problem that needed to be solved. How long do you think she suffered? Sarah asked, and for a moment I thought I heard a note of genuine concern in her voice. But Michael's response crushed any hope I might have harbored for their humanity. Hopefully not long. The sooner she went, the sooner we could start our real lives. As I lay there processing the magnitude of their betrayal, I began to understand that what I was witnessing wasn't just greed or impatience. It was something much darker. These two people had been actively planning my death, discussing methods, weighing options. My fake heart attack hadn't just revealed their lack of love, it had prevented what might have been my actual murder. We should probably go through her papers tonight, Sarah suggested. Figure out exactly what we're inheriting and how quickly we can access it. Good thinking, Michael agreed. Her will is in the safe upstairs. She gave me the combination last year for emergencies. The irony is beautiful, isn't it? She was so worried about making sure I could take care of things if something happened to her that she basically gave me the keys to her kingdom. That safe combination had been my Christmas gift to him last year, along with detailed instructions about all my important documents. I had spent weeks organizing everything, making sure he would never have to struggle with bureaucracy or legal complications if I died unexpectedly. I had even typed up a comprehensive list of account numbers, passwords, and contact information for all my financial institutions. What about her computer? Sarah asked. She does all her banking online, right? She wrote down all her passwords in a little notebook. Michael chuckled. It's in the kitchen drawer. She showed me where it was, just in case. She made it so easy for us. Every security measure I had put in place to protect my assets, while ensuring Michael could access them if needed, was now being turned against me. My careful planning, my trust, my desire to make his life easier, all of it was facilitating what amounted to the theft of my own legacy. Should we start going through things now? Sarah's eagerness was barely contained. Let's wait until after we call the paramedics and deal with the official stuff, Michael said pragmatically. We don't want to look too eager. Grief-stricken people don't usually start inventorying assets before the body is even cold. The body. He was talking about my body as if I were already a piece of property to be disposed of efficiently. But as I lay there, Listening to them plan their immediate future with my wealth, I realized something that gave me strength. They had made a crucial error. In their excitement to celebrate my death and plan their new lives, they had completely forgotten about the recording device I had placed on the bookshelf. Every word of their conversation, their celebration of my death, their casual discussion of how they might have murdered me, their eager planning to rifle through my belongings, all of it was being captured in crystal-clear digital audio. The evidence was mounting, and soon it would be time to reveal the truth. But first, I needed to hear just a little bit more. I needed to understand exactly how long they had been planning this betrayal, how deep their deception truly ran. The recording was about to become the most powerful weapon I had ever wielded. The moment had come. After 37 minutes of lying on that floor, listening to my son and his girlfriend celebrate my death and plan their future with my money, I had heard enough, more than enough. My phone had captured every damning word, every heartless laugh, every cruel revelation. The evidence was irrefutable, and my decision was made. It was time to rise from the dead and confront the two people who had just proven they were capable of murder. I waited until they had moved back into the kitchen, giving me enough time to carefully sit up and retrieve my phone from the bookshelf. My body ached from lying motionless on the hard floor for so long, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins made me feel stronger than I had in years. As I stood in the hallway, just out of sight from the kitchen, I could hear them still talking, still planning, still celebrating. Sarah was suggesting they book a trip to Europe as soon as the insurance money came through. Michael was wondering aloud about whether they should sell the house immediately or rent it out for extra income. I checked my phone to make sure the recording was still active. 43 minutes and counting. Everything was there. Their celebration, their discussion of how they might have murdered me, their plans to rifle through my belongings, their complete lack of grief or remorse. It was more evidence than any prosecutor could ask for. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself and walked into the kitchen doorway. The sight that greeted me would be burned into my memory forever. Michael and Sarah were sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I had served him countless meals, helped him with homework, listened to his problems, and shared the joys and sorrows of our lives together. They had opened a $200 bottle of wine from my collection, the one I had been saving for a truly special occasion. Sarah was actually wearing my pearl necklace, the one my grandmother had given me and I had planned to leave to her someday. Michael had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking more relaxed and happy than I had seen him in years. For a moment, neither of them noticed me standing there. They were too absorbed in their celebration, too intoxicated by their sudden windfall, too confident in their new freedom to pay attention to their surroundings. "You know what I'm looking forward to most?" Michael was saying, refilling their wine glasses with generous pours. "Never having to pretend to care about her stupid stories again. Never having to act interested in her garden or her volunteer work or her—" That's when Sarah looked up and saw me. The wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the kitchen floor, the sound like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Her face went white, then red, then white again, as her brain struggled to process what she was seeing. "Michael," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He followed her gaze, turning in his chair to look at me, and I watched as every drop of color drained from his face. His mouth fell open, and for several long seconds, no sound came out. "Hello, son," I said quietly, holding up my phone so they could see the screen with its recording indicator still blinking. "Having a nice celebration?" Michael's chair scraped against the floor as he shot to his feet, his eyes wide with shock and something that might have been fear. "Mom? What? How are you? We thought you were dead?" I supplied helpfully. "Yes, I gathered that from your champagne toast. Very touching, by the way." Sarah had gone completely silent, her eyes fixed on my phone with the expression of someone watching her entire future crumble in real time. "I recorded everything," I continued, my voice steady despite the earthquake of emotions raging inside me. "Every word, every laugh, every cruel comment about my death being a blessing. Every discussion about how you might have helped things along with my medication. Every eager plan to spend my money before my body was even cold." Michael's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Mom, you don't understand. We were in shock. People say crazy things when they're grieving." "Grieving?" I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. "Is that what you call opening champagne and planning a European vacation?" Is that what you call wearing my grandmother's pearls while discussing how long you'll wait before calling the paramedics? Sarah finally found her voice. Mrs. Henderson, this is all a misunderstanding. You were just celebrating my death. I cut her off. You were just discussing how you might have murdered me if nature hadn't done the job for you. You were just planning to lie to the police about attempting CPR while you pillaged my belongings. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see both of them frantically trying to think of explanations, excuses, ways to minimize what they had revealed. But we all knew the truth. The recording on my phone contained evidence of conspiracy, elder abuse, and potentially premeditated murder. You want to know the truly tragic part of all this? I asked, looking directly at Michael. I was actually planning to give you access to most of my money anyway, not through my death, but as gifts while I was alive to see you enjoy them. I had an appointment with my lawyer next week to discuss transferring a significant portion of my assets to you. Michael's face went even paler, if that was possible. But now, I continued, now I know exactly what kind of man I raised, and I know that every sacrifice I made, every dollar I spent, every moment of love I gave you was wasted on someone who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. The reckoning had begun, and the recording in my hand was about to change everything. The kitchen had become a courtroom, and I was both the prosecutor and the key witness. Michael and Sarah sat frozen at my table, their celebration turned to ash, their future plans crumbling with each word I spoke. Let me share some of the highlights from your celebration, I said, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from them with deliberate calm. Would you like to hear your exact words, Michael, when you checked my pulse and found me supposedly dead? Michael's hands were shaking now. Mom, please, let me explain. Finally free from this old woman, I quoted, my voice cutting through his protest like a blade. Those were your exact words. Your mother's body wasn't even cold, and you were celebrating your freedom. Sarah tried to stand, but I held up my hand. Sit down, dear. We're not finished. You see, this recording is 43 minutes long. 43 minutes of you two planning your new lives with my money, discussing how you might have murdered me, and revealing the truth about what I meant to you. I touched the phone's screen, and the sound of Michael's voice filled the kitchen. To freedom. To finally being able to live our own lives without that constant burden. Michael flinched as if he'd been slapped. Hearing his own words played back seemed to finally make him understand the magnitude of what he had revealed. Stop, he whispered. Please stop. Oh, but we're just getting started, I replied, scrolling through the recording. Here's another lovely moment. Sarah, this is you talking about my manipulation and guilt trips when I expressed loneliness and wanted to spend time with my family. Sarah's voice emerged from the phone speaker. The guilt trips were the worst, always talking about how lonely she was, how much she missed having family around. It was so manipulative. And here, I continued relentlessly, is my son explaining how easy it would have been to murder me with my own medication. Michael's voice played back with chilling clarity. Her blood pressure medication, for instance. Double or triple the dose, and it would look like she made a mistake. Old people do that all the time. The color had completely drained from Michael's face. I was drunk. I didn't mean... You weren't drunk when you said it, I interrupted. This was 20 minutes into the recording. You were perfectly coherent when you discussed how to kill me and make it look like an accident. I stood up and began pacing the kitchen, my anger finally beginning to show. Do you have any idea what it's like to hear your own child discuss murdering you? To realize that every time you helped me organize my medication, you were thinking about how you could use those same pills to kill me? We never would have actually. Sarah started to protest. Wouldn't you? I spun to face her. You were discussing it pretty casually for people who would never actually consider it. And what about this conversation? I played another section where Michael discussed how they could make my death look like suicide using my sleeping pills and wine. This isn't just greed, I said, my voice rising. This is premeditation. This is conspiracy to commit murder. Do you understand what I'm holding in my hand? This is evidence of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit murder. Michael finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. What do you want from us? What do I want? I laughed bitterly. I want my son back. I want the loving child I raised, the boy who used to pick me flowers and tell me he loved me. But that person never really existed, did he? It was all an act, All manipulation to secure your inheritance. I sat back down, suddenly feeling every one of my 67 years. What I want is impossible, Michael. I want to undo the last 30 years of my life and not waste my love on someone who saw me as a burden to be eliminated. Mom, I do love you, Michael said desperately. I made a mistake. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. Stressed? I cut him off. You were stressed by the prospect of me dying, because that's not what this recording reveals. This recording shows two people who have been waiting and planning for my death, who see me as nothing more than an obstacle to their happiness. I pulled up another section of the recording. Here's you discussing my will and how I made it so easy for you by sharing the safe combination and my passwords. Here's you planning to go through my belongings tonight to inventory assets. Here's you calculating the exact value of my estate down to my vintage car collection. With each revelation, I watched their hope diminish. They were beginning to understand that there was no explanation, no excuse, no way to minimize what they had revealed about themselves. The most heartbreaking part, I continued, my voice growing quieter, is that I was about to give you most of what you wanted anyway. Next week, I had an appointment with my lawyer to discuss transferring $1.5 million to you while I was alive. I wanted to see you enjoy it, wanted to watch you build your dreams with money I was happy to give. Michael's face crumpled. You were going to give you everything, I finished, because I loved you, because I wanted you to be happy, because I thought you cared about me even a little bit. But this recording proves that your love was conditional on my death, and that you were actively planning ways to make that happen sooner rather than later. The evidence was laid bare, the truth revealed in all its ugly reality. Now came the question of what to do with this devastating knowledge and this damning recording that could destroy their lives as completely as their betrayal had destroyed mine. The silence stretched between us like a chasm that could never be bridged. Michael and Sarah sat across from me, their faces pale and drawn, while I held their entire future in the digital recording on my phone. You know what the worst part is? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It's not just that you wanted me dead. It's that you've been pretending to love me while planning my murder. Every hug, every "I love you, Mom," every birthday card. It was all lies. Michael's hands were clasped so tightly in front of him that his knuckles had turned white. Mom, please, I know how this looks, but how this looks? I interrupted, my voice gaining strength. This isn't about how it looks, Michael. This is about what it is. This is about you checking my pulse and whispering, "Finally free," when you thought I was dead. This is about you celebrating with champagne while my body was supposedly cooling on the living room floor. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the garden where Michael had helped me plant tomatoes just last month. Even that memory was tainted now. Had he been thinking about my death while we worked together in the soil? I need you both to understand something, I said, turning back to face them. This recording doesn't just contain evidence of your callousness. It contains evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. When you discussed using my medication to kill me, when you talked about making it look like an accident, you crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. Sarah finally spoke, her voice trembling. Mrs. Henderson, we were just talking. We never actually planned to. To what? Kill me? I laughed harshly. You discussed methods. You talked about timing. You considered how to avoid suspicion. That's not just talking, dear. That's planning. I returned to the table and sat down, placing my phone between us like evidence in a trial. So here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to my lawyer's office. Not to transfer money to you, Michael, but to completely restructure my will. Michael's face went gray. Mom, you can't. I can't what? Decide how to distribute my own assets? Remove a son who celebrated my death from my will? Protect myself from people who discussed murdering me? My voice was rising again. I can do whatever I want with my money, and what I want is to make sure you never benefit from my death. But this is all a misunderstanding, Michael protested desperately. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. Counseling? I stared at him in disbelief. You think counseling is going to fix the fact that you discussed tripling my blood pressure medication to kill me? You think therapy is going to erase the sound of you toasting my death? Sarah leaned forward, her face earnest. Mrs. Henderson, people say terrible things when they're in shock. We thought you were dead, and we weren't thinking clearly. You weren't in shock, I said firmly. Shock would have meant calling 911 immediately. Shock would have meant attempting CPR. Shock would have meant grief, tears, panic. What you experienced was relief and excitement. There's a big difference. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the recording again. You want to hear shock? Let me play you the sound of real grief. I found the section where they discussed my jewelry and played Sarah's voice. She really picked the perfect timing. Right after the birthday party, when everyone's already gone home. No witnesses to deal with. No awkward explanations about why we're not more upset. That, I said after stopping the playback, is not shock. That's calculation. That's someone who's relieved they won't have to fake grief in front of witnesses. Michael buried his face in his hands. What do you want from us? What can we do to fix this? Fix this? I repeated incredulously. Michael, there is no fixing this. You can't unsay those words. You can't unfeel that relief when you thought I was dead. You can't undo the fact that you've been waiting for me to die so you could start your real life. I stood up again, pacing to release some of the energy coursing through me. But what you can do is face the consequences. Tomorrow, I'm not just changing my will. I'm also taking this recording to the police. Both of them went rigid with fear. The police? Sarah whispered. Elder abuse is a serious crime, I explained matter-of-factly. So is conspiracy to commit murder. The district attorney's office has a special unit that prosecutes these cases, and this recording is exactly the kind of evidence they need. Mom, you can't be serious, Michael said, his voice breaking. I'm your son. I'm all the family you have left. No, I corrected him. A son is someone who loves you, who cares about your well-being, who would be devastated by your death. What you are is a stranger who shares my DNA and has been pretending to be my son while planning my murder. The truth was setting in for both of them. This wasn't going to be resolved with apologies or explanations. This wasn't a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with the right words. This was the end of our relationship, and potentially the beginning of serious legal consequences for them. The really tragic irony, I continued, is that if you had just been honest with me, if you had just told me you needed money, I would have helped you. I always helped you, Michael. Every time you were in trouble, every time you needed something, I was there. But instead of asking for help, you decided it would be easier to wait for me to die. I looked at both of them, these two people who had been planning my death while eating my food and living in my home. Well, congratulations. You're about to get exactly what you wanted. Freedom from the burden of having me in your lives. But it's not going to come with my money. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my mood as I prepared for what would be the most difficult day of my life. I had spent the night in my bedroom with the door locked, listening to Michael and Sarah arguing in hushed tones downstairs, their voices occasionally rising to frantic whispers before falling back to urgent murmurs. They hadn't left the house. I suppose they were afraid of how it would look, fleeing in the night after their supposed celebration of grief. Or perhaps they were still hoping they could somehow convince me that their recorded confessions were just the product of shock and alcohol, despite the cold calculation evident in every word they had spoken. At 8:30 a.m., I called my attorney, Margaret Willis, and arranged an emergency meeting. Margaret had been handling my legal affairs for 15 years, and I knew she would understand the gravity of the situation. Gloria, you sound upset, Margaret said when I arrived at her office an hour later. What's happened? I handed her my phone with the recording queued up. I need you to listen to this, Margaret. All of it. And then I need you to help me understand what legal options I have. For the next 43 minutes, Margaret listened to my son celebrate my death, plan to rifle through my belongings, discuss how he might have murdered me, and reveal the depth of his deception about our relationship. Her expression grew darker with each passing minute. My God, Gloria, she said when the recording ended. This is evidence of elder abuse, conspiracy, and potentially attempted murder. You need to take this to the police immediately. I was hoping you'd say that, I replied. I also need to completely restructure my will. I want Michael removed as my beneficiary, and I want to make sure that even if something does happen to me, he can't benefit from my death. Absolutely, Margaret agreed. We can create a new will today that not only removes him, but specifically states that he's been disinherited due to elder abuse and threats against your life. The recording will support that decision legally. We spent the next 2 hours restructuring my entire estate plan. Instead of leaving everything to Michael, I would be creating a foundation to support elder abuse prevention and education. I also established a trust that would provide for my care if I became incapacitated, with Margaret as the trustee instead of Michael. The most satisfying change was the specific clause explaining Michael's disinheritance. I specifically exclude my son, Michael Henderson, from any inheritance due to his demonstrated elder abuse, his celebration of my presumed death, and his recorded discussions of methods to murder me. This exclusion is made with full knowledge and after careful consideration. This recording also changes your vulnerability status significantly, Margaret explained as we finished the paperwork. If anything happens to you now, any accident or sudden illness, this recording provides clear motive for investigation. At 2:00 p.m., we walked into the Nashville Metropolitan Police Department's downtown precinct. Margaret had called ahead to arrange a meeting with Detective Sarah Morrison from the Elder Abuse Unit. Detective Morrison was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened intently as I explained the situation, then asked to hear the recording. "Mrs. Henderson," she said after listening to selected portions, "this is one of the clearest cases of elder abuse conspiracy I've encountered. The fact that they discussed specific methods of harming you while believing you were already dead shows premeditation and intent." "What happens now?" I asked. "We're going to open a formal investigation," Detective Morrison explained. "This recording provides probable cause for several charges: elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder, and financial exploitation. We'll need to conduct interviews, but with evidence this clear, I expect we'll be making arrests within the week." The weight of those words settled over me. My son was going to be arrested. The child I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for was going to face criminal charges because of evidence I had provided. "I know this must be incredibly difficult for you," Detective Morrison continued gently, "but you need to understand that what they did, what they planned to do, is serious criminal behavior. This recording may have saved your life." When I returned home that evening, Michael and Sarah were waiting for me in the living room. They both looked haggard, as if they hadn't slept. Michael's eyes were red-rimmed, and Sarah looked like she had been crying. "Mom," Michael said, as soon as I walked in, "we need to talk. We've been thinking about everything that happened, and we want to make this right." "Make it right?" I repeated, setting down my purse and looking at them both. "That's interesting timing, considering I just spent the day with my lawyer and the police." The color drained from both their faces. "The police?" Sarah whispered. "Elder abuse is a felony in Tennessee," I explained calmly. "So is conspiracy to commit murder. The recording I made yesterday provides clear evidence of both crimes." Michael shot to his feet. "Mom, you can't be serious. I'm your son." "Yes," I agreed. "And that makes what you did even worse. The law has special provisions for family members who abuse elderly relatives. The penalties are enhanced." "We never actually hurt you," Sarah protested. "No, but you planned to," I replied. "And you celebrated what you thought was my death, and you discussed specific methods of killing me. Intent and conspiracy are crimes, even if you didn't get the chance to carry them out." The reality was finally sinking in for both of them. This wasn't going to be resolved with apologies or family counseling. This was a criminal matter now, with legal consequences that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Justice was in motion, and there was no stopping it. 3 days later, the knock came at 6:47 a.m. I watched from my bedroom window as Detective Morrison and 3 other officers approached my front door. Michael and Sarah were still asleep in the guest room, blissfully unaware that their world was about to change forever. I had been awake for hours, unable to sleep, as I wrestled with the conflicting emotions of a mother about to watch her son be arrested. Part of me felt triumphant. Justice was finally being served for their betrayal and their plans to murder me. But another part of me grieved for the relationship I thought we had, for the son I believed Michael to be, for the family that was about to be destroyed completely. The doorbell rang, followed by loud, authoritative knocking. "Police, open up!" I heard scrambling from downstairs, panicked voices, the sound of feet hitting the floor as Michael and Sarah were jolted awake by the reality of their situation. "Mrs. Henderson?" Detective Morrison called through the door. "This is Detective Morrison. We have warrants." I made my way downstairs, my robe pulled tight around me, and opened the door to find 4 officers on my front porch. Detective Morrison held up 2 pieces of paper. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. "We have arrest warrants for Michael Henderson and Sarah Collins. Are they here?" "They're upstairs," I replied, stepping aside to let the officers enter. Michael appeared at the top of the stairs, his hair disheveled, wearing only pajama pants and a t-shirt. "What's going on? Mom, what did you do?" "Michael Henderson," Detective Morrison called up to him. "You're under arrest for elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder, and financial exploitation of an elderly person. Please come down slowly with your hands visible." The look on Michael's face was one I will never forget: shock, disbelief, and finally, terrified understanding. This was really happening. His mother had really turned him in to the police. "You have the right to remain silent," Detective Morrison began as Michael descended the stairs, his hands shaking. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Sarah appeared next, crying hysterically as a female officer placed her in handcuffs. "Mrs. Henderson, please, we're sorry. We didn't mean any of it." But it was too late for apologies. The investigation had moved beyond regret and into the realm of criminal justice. As they led Michael toward the door in handcuffs, he turned to look at me one last time. "Mom, how could you do this to your own son?" The question hit me like a physical blow, but I found my voice. "How could you celebrate my death? How could you plan to murder me? How could you pretend to love me while counting down the days until my funeral?" He had no answer for that. After they were gone, I sat in my living room, the same room where I had faked my heart attack just 4 days earlier, and tried to process what had just happened. My son was in jail. My home felt empty and hollow. The family I thought I had was gone forever, but I wasn't alone for long. Within hours, my phone began ringing. The news of Michael's arrest had somehow leaked, probably through the police scanner or court records, and suddenly my quiet street was filled with news vans. Margaret arrived by noon to help me navigate the media attention. "They're calling you brave," she told me. "Social media is buzzing with support for what you did." I looked out the window at the reporters gathered on my lawn. "I don't feel brave. I feel heartbroken." "You saved your own life," Margaret reminded me. "That recording revealed plans for your murder. You didn't just catch them being cruel. You caught them planning to kill you." The legal process moved quickly. Michael and Sarah were denied bail due to the flight risk and the serious nature of the charges. The recording I had made was entered into evidence, and their defense attorneys could offer no credible explanation for their clients' recorded words. Within 2 weeks, faced with overwhelming evidence, both Michael and Sarah agreed to plea bargains. Michael pleaded guilty to elder abuse and conspiracy charges and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Sarah, who had been charged as an accessory, received 4 years. The financial impact was immediate and devastating for them. Legal fees, court costs, and restitution, they were ordered to pay me $50,000 for emotional damages, wiped out what little savings they had. The European vacation they had planned to take with my money would never happen. But the most significant consequence was the complete destruction of our relationship. The son who had once been the center of my world was now a convicted felon who had planned my murder. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, no rebuilding of trust. I had won in court, but I had lost my family forever. The house felt different now, larger and lonelier, but also safer. I no longer had to worry about someone increasing my medication or tampering with my food. I no longer had to wonder if the person claiming to love me was actually planning my death. The foundation I established with my revised will began operating immediately, helping other elderly people recognize and report abuse. My story became a cautionary tale that helped save other families from similar betrayals. Justice had been served, but the cost had been everything I thought I knew about love, family, and trust. 6 months later, I stood in the garden behind my house, tending to the roses that Michael had helped me plant years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, nurturing something beautiful that was connected to him, even after everything that had happened. The media attention had finally died down. The reporters had moved on to other stories, and my quiet Nashville street had returned to normal. But my life would never be the same. The foundation I established, the Gloria Henderson Foundation for Elder Abuse Prevention, had already helped 17 families navigate similar situations.
The recording that destroyed my relationship with my son had become a powerful tool for educating people about the warning signs of elder abuse within families. I received letters daily from people who had heard my story. Some were from elderly individuals who recognized similar patterns in their own families. Others were from adult children who were horrified by Michael's behavior.
and wanted to reassure me that not all children saw their parents as burdens to be eliminated.
One letter, in particular, had moved me to tears. It was from a 72-year-old woman in Oregon whose daughter had been stealing from her for years. After hearing my story on the news, she had found the courage to install a recording device in her own home. The evidence she gathered led to her daughter's arrest and conviction. "You saved my life," she wrote. "I was starting to think I was paranoid and imagining things. Your courage gave me the strength to protect myself." That letter made everything worthwhile. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the loneliness, even the loss of my son. If my pain could prevent other elderly people from suffering similar abuse, then perhaps some good could come from this tragedy. I had also discovered something unexpected in the aftermath of Michael's arrest. I was stronger than I had ever imagined. For 67 years, I had defined myself primarily as a mother, a caregiver, someone whose worth was measured by how well I served others. But the crisis had forced me to save myself, to stand up for my own rights, to value my own life enough to fight for it. The loneliness was real and painful. Evenings were the hardest, when I would sit in my living room and remember all the conversations Michael and I used to have. But I had learned to distinguish between grief for the son I thought I had and acceptance of the truth about who he really was. My new will provided for a comfortable life in a senior community when I was ready for that transition. The money I had once planned to leave to Michael would now fund scholarships for social workers specializing in elder abuse, support groups for elderly victims, and legal aid for families facing similar crises. Detective Morrison visited occasionally to update me on other cases where my story had provided crucial insights. The recording had become a training tool for law enforcement, helping officers understand how sophisticated and calculating elder abuse could be. "You've probably saved more lives than you'll ever know," she told me during one visit. "Adult children who were considering harming their elderly parents are thinking twice after seeing the consequences Michael faced." The house was quieter now, but it was also safer. I had installed a comprehensive security system, not because I feared Michael, he was safely incarcerated, but because the experience had taught me the importance of protecting myself. I had also made new friends through the foundation work. Other elderly individuals who had survived family betrayals, social workers who fought elder abuse daily, and volunteers who believed in the cause had created a new kind of family for me, one based on shared values and mutual respect rather than blood relations. The recording that had captured my son's betrayal had also captured something else, my own strength in the face of devastating betrayal. When I listened to it now, I heard not just Michael's cruelty, but my own courage in lying on that floor, gathering evidence that would protect me and potentially save others. Would I change what happened if I could? Would I choose ignorance over the painful truth about my son's nature? The question haunted me some nights, but the answer was always the same. No. Better to know the truth and live safely than to remain in a loving delusion that could have cost me my life. My name is Gloria Henderson. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I faked a heart attack to test my son's love and discovered his plan to murder me. The recording I made that night destroyed my family, but saved my life and potentially the lives of countless other elderly people. If you've made it this far in my story, I want you to know that you have the power to protect yourself and your loved ones. Trust your instincts, document suspicious behavior, and never let anyone convince you that abuse is normal or acceptable, even from family members. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel if my story has touched you or taught you something important. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one, and they bring me comfort on difficult days. Remember, your life has value. Your safety matters, and you deserve to be surrounded by people who truly love you, not people who see you as an obstacle to their happiness. Stay safe, stay strong, and never stop fighting for the love and respect you deserve.